Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining the MONAI Bootcamp Day 1. My name is Michael Zephyr, and I work at NVIDIA as a technical marketing engineer, and I'm also part of the MONAI Adoption and Outreach Working Group. I'm one of the leads along with Purna Dogra, and part of that is hosting events like this MONAI Bootcamp. And so for Day 1, we'll talk about what the agenda is going to be today. We have an event tomorrow as well, so I'll talk a little bit about what's going to happen on Day 2. I'll give you a little bit of an intro into MONAI. We'll talk about the Discord channel. We'll talk about recordings. Also, sort of those good introductory questions. If you have any questions, in the email link you should have received during registration, there is a Discord link in there, but I also put it in Zoom chat, and I'll go ahead and post it again now. That way you have access to it, just in case you didn't see it there. So go ahead and join Discord. And that's where, again, we'll do Q&A in there. In the Meetup Bootcamp, there's sort of a Q&A channel in there. And so we can go ahead and do all of our Q&A. So if you have any questions about anything that we do today, feel free to put it in there. And I'll try to answer it, or someone else in the presentation will also try to answer it. And you can ask Q&As sort of throughout the event today. So let's first talk about the agenda for today. So we have 2 days of material that we're going to be covering. And for Day 1, it's really about an introduction to MONAI. So if you don't know what MONAI is, maybe you've used 1 or 2 pieces of MONAI, but you haven't used everything and you're interested in learning more, this is a great day to be here. And we're going to kind of follow the order of going a general introduction of MONAI. So that'll be kind of covering overall what MONAI is, why MONAI, the different pieces of MONAI, our working groups, our advisory board. Then we'll dive into MONAI Core for about 2.5 hours or so. And we'll go over an intro to MONAI Core. You'll have an end-to-end workflow for hands-on training. We'll talk about MONAI Bundle and the MONAI Model Zoo. And then we'll take a coffee break or a water break. And then we'll jump back into MONAI Label, where we'll do an intro to MONAI Label and a demo of 3D Slicer. For MONAI Label, it's a little trickier to do sort of a hands-on piece for that because it requires a viewer and other things. But we have a lot of great instructions for doing that and getting started online and on our YouTube channel. So I encourage you, after some of these demos that we kind of showcase, go and take a look at a lot of the resources that are out there and try to play with it on your own and start getting some of these things spun up. And so after MONAI Label, we'll take a lunch break, roughly 50 minutes, but we'll see where we are with timing at that point, and maybe it's a little less, maybe it's a little bit more. And then from lunch break, we'll come back and we'll talk about MONAI Deploy. So we have sort of an intro teaser to MONAI Deploy, and then we'll dive a little bit deeper into a MONAI Deploy overview, the different pieces of it. I think there's going to be a little bit of maybe a hands-on sort of live coding session that Vikash will walk you through. And then we'll end the day with MONAI Deploy in the cloud on AWS. So AWS has a lot of infrastructure that supports MONAI in the overall workflow of sort of cloud and AWS, different properties on AWS, things like SageMaker or Health Lake Imaging. And so they're going to talk a little bit about some of those options for MONAI Deploy. For Day 2 is really around federated learning. If you don't know about what federated learning is, the base idea, and I'll talk a little bit more about it on a slide as we get into it, is how do you kind of take data that is at different locations, maybe different hospitals, for instance, and train it so that you have this one global model so you can utilize data across different locations, but still thinking about privacy and still thinking about how do you kind of maintain and not necessarily transfer data, but only sort of pieces of a model. And that's what we're going to dive into on Day 2. So we'll talk about an intro to FL. We'll talk about how MONAI has federated learning APIs, and there's an NVIDIA Flare library as well that has integration for the MONAI FL APIs, so you can see an example of how that works. And then some real-world use cases of federated learning. So one is going to be Canon, and the other one is going to be AWS again, because they have a blog post and some more recent material around how do you use federated learning and MONAI in the cloud, and kind of do that in a scalable way and using their infrastructure. So if you haven't signed up for it yet, you can use the same link that you registered for to sign up for Day 1 or Day 2, since you're already here for Day 1. If you didn't sign up for Day 2, feel free to do that, and you'll get the email for day 2, and maybe we'll see you tomorrow for federated learning. So really quickly, I mentioned already MONAI Discord. So we have a MONAI Discord channel. I encourage you to go onto that MONAI Discord channel because, again, it makes it easier to deal with Q&A because there's threading. You can kind of message people directly. It has a bit better history of it, so we can go back and look at the Q&A and kind of reply in threads and everything. Just a little bit nicer than Zoom or Zoom Q&A allows you to do. And so I encourage you, the link is there on this slide. I put it in Zoom chat as well. And it should also be in the email you got for this event as well. So I think it'll say like MONAI Discord, and it's a hyperlink within the actual text for it. So either way that you join, I encourage you to do that. And just some quick notes about Discord. So there's when you first join, you'll have a thing where you have to accept the info and rules. And I have a arrow here pointing to it at the very top, so you can kind of go over the general info and rules we have for the server. For general chat, there's a MONAI community category, and you can see that there's a hashtag general chat in there. Feel free to talk about whatever you want in there. There's an introduce yourself channel in there as well. Say what your name is, say where you work, where your institute's at, if you're a researcher or a student, where you go to school, where you work at, and introduce yourself to the community. And if you're working on any cool projects, feel free to drop a GitHub link, whatever other link, a paper link that you're interested in sharing about yourself or work that you might be doing. And that way people can get to know you, and you can share some of the things that you're doing with the community. And then off topic, any other kind of fun things, general or off topic is kind of a good place to put it. But yeah, I encourage you to chat with the other people who are here at the event and get to know everyone. And again, definitely feel free to introduce yourself. You can put LinkedIn links in there for your profile if you want to connect with people. And that way you kind of start to get to know more of the community. For the Q&A channel, it's under the MONAI Meetup and Bootcamp section, and there's a Q&A channel in there. And that's where you can ask a lot of your questions as we sort of get into the labs, get into the presentations. That way there's sort of one place to kind of go over everything. And last but not least, one of the most important ones is, how do you leave a voice channel in Discord? If you click on one of the icons that has a little speaker icon like office hours 1, 2, or 3, or the general one that has that same sort of sound icon, the way that you leave it is on the left-hand sidebar at the very bottom of the channel list. It should say voice connected, and there's a little phone with an X mark on it. Click that, and that'll drop you out of the voice channel, but keep you in the server itself. It won't drop you out of Discord or leave the server. It'll just remove you from those voice channels. But those voice channels are there so that if you have any questions and we need to help you a little bit more directly, or maybe someone else wants to chat with you in about maybe something you post in general or in the introduce yourself section, feel free to use those other channels that are there to go through and chat with other people from the community. So I want to talk about the hands-on section really quickly before we dive into the intro. So we're going to be going over a hands-on section today, and it's at that link there, and I'll drop that link also in chat here in a moment. It is in Zoom chat there, and I'll go ahead and put it in general chat on the Discord server. And so there's 3 options for you to get started with a hands-on today. One is you can just clone the repo onto your workstation that you have and set up any dependencies that you need. There's usually, if you already have sort of a data science environment set up, there's only going to be a few other things that you might need to install, like pip install MONAI, MONAI label, MONAI deploy, depending on which piece you're actually working on. And it should be relatively easy to get set up, especially if you already have a data science sort of workflow. But there are 2 other options that we have. We have Google Colab. And so in the README on that repo, when you go down to the MONAI core section, there are links to, let's say, Open in Colab or Open in Studio Lab. If you click Open in Colab, it'll open you up to Google Colab, and you can go ahead and go through that workflow for the hands-on piece. The third option is something called Amazon SageMaker Studio Lab. And Amazon was gracious enough to provide us with codes for their Studio Lab environment. It's kind of like in a beta phase right now where you need a referral code to get access for things into that one. So if you were to click on one of those Studio Lab links, it'll take you over to the page, but to actually run any of the content, you do need a referral code. And so with the referral code, I have a bunch of them in a notepad, but they're meant to be sort of, there's a limitation to how many we can kind of give out per referral code. And so the easiest ways to do that is if you want to use Studio Lab and try it out for today, send me a message in Discord. I have a little icon here, an image here of my name. So my name is M Zephyr, and you'll see a little crown on mine because I'm the owner of the server for the MONAI Discord server. Send me a message on Discord saying, hey, I want access to Studio Lab. And as I get a chance when I'm done with my presentation, I will send you a referral code for you to, when you sign up for Studio Lab, at the very last question, we'll ask for that referral code. You put it into the referral code slot. You'll get an email saying, hey, it looks like you're trying to request an account. You verify your account, and then you have access to Studio Lab as well. But any of those options are great ways to get involved in the hands-on section, or you can just kind of follow along with us. We're going to walk through and show the solutions for everything. So if you're not feeling up to coding, or maybe you kind of don't want to work on it today and just kind of want to work on it on a different day, that's also okay. Again, this repo and that GitHub repo is going to be there. We kind of keep it there as sort of a place where we have all of our bootcamp content regularly, along with slides and links to other things. So take a look at it tomorrow, next week, a month from now, and maybe then you'll be able to walk through it whenever you get a chance to do that. So I'm going to dive in a little bit more into a quick overview. I'm going to go over some of these things kind of quickly because we're going to talk a lot about them throughout the different pieces today. And so, yeah, diving in, one of the big things is the promise of AI in medical imaging. A lot of the data that we have in the world is from healthcare, roughly about 30%, and about 90% of that data is from healthcare imaging. And there are a lot of cool projects already out there that are in the works, that are out there on papers, in GitHub repos, things like our federated learning COVID example, or a UNETer example, which is a transformer model we have in MONAI, or some registration examples, detection. There's a lot of cool things coming out of the medical field around deep learning and medical imaging. But AI is not a hammer. We need to collaborate with clinicians. We need to have experts in the field who can help us along with that. And so we have experts on one side who have sort of that guidance, and then the team of researchers who are developing the models. And that collaboration is really, really important. And so that's part of why we created MONAI. And so MONAI is, it's actually sort of a broader Project MONAI, and it's a collaborative open source initiative built by academic and industry leaders for deep learning in healthcare imaging. And so the idea is to create a community around AI researchers who can exchange best practices in AI for healthcare across academia, enterprise researchers, with the goal of accelerating the pace of innovation. So the idea is we don't want you to rebuild the wheel. We want people to contribute to the MONAI community and have it as sort of a nice best practice way to get started in AI for medical imaging. We have a MONAI Advisory Board stemming from a lot of different institutes from across the world, places like Kitware, King's College London, University of Colorado, Stanford, NCI, Warwick, NVIDIA, Chinese Academy, and a lot of other places are represented within the advisory board, and then also within our working groups. And so the idea behind our advisory board and working groups is that we have the advisory board who guides sort of bigger objectives within MONAI. And then we have our working groups that are more focused. So some of the people here also lead some of those working groups, and they focus on a lot more specific subjects within medical imaging. And here are some of those working groups. So we have things like the Imaging IO working group, data working group, transformations, federated learning, benchmarking, research, community development, deploy, digital pathology, and there's a new streaming working group that's not listed here as well, but it is on our About Us page on the MONAI website. And then really quickly, again, if we have a decision that we want to make in MONAI, it kind of will go through the advisory board if it's sort of a bigger disruptive idea, and then kind of figure out what working group needs to take advantage of it and kind of start working on that. And if it's more of a working group scope, maybe you're part of the deploy working group and you want to talk about that. There's meetings that are for the deploy working group. There's GitHub repos, issues, pull requests to contribute and work with those working groups to kind of get your idea integrated into the community. So what is MONAI? We have a lot of different frameworks within MONAI. So MONAI Core being the central one, which is around deep learning training, and then things for AI-assisted annotation and end-to-end clinical deployment. And so the idea is we have data across all of these, and the typical flow is you have to label, train, you develop your app, and then you deploy your app. And so we try to cover all of those from MONAI label, MONAI core, MONAI deploy, and then some other deployment pieces underneath MONAI deploy, things like inference service, workflow manager, informatics gateway. And again, we'll talk more about these as we kind of get into things as well. And one more kind of look at it is it's kind of giving developers an AI factory. And so the idea is you have labeling, you have model zoo, which we'll talk about in a little bit, MONAI core, and then you can create something called a map, which is kind of this connector Docker container image that lets you take your model and take it anywhere. Cloud services, hospitals, embedded medical devices. The idea is to make it easy to create and distribute your models. And so the stack of MONAI is really that we have this base system of it's developed on PyTorch, and it's utilizing the base containers from NVIDIA around PyTorch that have CUDA optimizations for things, and a lot of it is GPU optimized. You can run it not on GPUs, but it usually is a better experience if you run it on GPU, and we test it and validate it on GPUs as well. And then you kind of move up, and we talked about MONAI being sort of that core flagship library. We have MONAI label, MONAI deploy, model zoo on top of those. And then we have things like our MONAI research, MONAI tutorials, maps, research specs, pipelines, samples, and a lot of other things kind of built on top of that to make it easy for you guys to get started with MONAI. Really quickly, I've mentioned the model zoo a few times, and I'll mention it later in my hands-on piece as well. But the MONAI Model Zoo is a place where we are putting these things called MONAI bundles, which we'll talk about as well later, to kind of get people jump started on training. And we have a lot of different modalities on there, from CT to endoscopy. And then we also have things like segmentation, detection, and reconstruction on there as well. And we have a lot of contributors to that repo. But if it's something that you're interested in contributing a model, that's something that let me know and I can help point you in the right direction, or we can give you guidance for how you might go ahead and do that. But we also have a contribution guide in our MONAI repo as well for how to do that. And so our design goals are having customizability, being composable, being domain specialized, being GPU optimized, reproducibility, and high quality. And the idea is that we want to make it as easy as possible for you to get started with MONAI. And even if that means one function or two functions, a transform, a data loader, whatever that means, having notebooks that showcase how you can do those things. And then I mentioned GPU optimized already, so making sure that things run quickly and fast and work well on GPUs. And then having other events like this where we can kind of get you onboarded, started, and make things really nice for the onboarding process. Overall for MONAI, we've had about 3 years worth of MONAI sort of development back from around 2019. And over that time, we have had about 280,000 downloads for MONAI Core, over 20 for MONAI Label, 10,000 for MONAI Deploy, and over 150 contributors and over 30 institutions contributing to MONAI. And there's a lot of great institutes who contribute to MONAI. We talked about some of them who are already on the advisory board and in the working groups, but we have places like Mayo Clinic, who you'll hear from later today, King's College London as well, people like Answer Digital, Frederick's National Lab, UCSF, NIH, MGB, Vanderbilt, Stanford, Methinks, AI Center for Value-Based Healthcare, NHS, and a lot of other institutions that are out there. And there's quite a few places where it's actually being deployed now and being used as how do we actually use MONAI in our workflow, in our environments. And there are places like Children's Hospital of Philadelphia with Dr. Matt Jolly, who's using MONAI Label. Harris Schwab, who is part of the AID project at the NHS, and they're using MONAI Deploy to deploy at NHS trusts. And George Cardosa is the CTO of the London AI Center for Value-Based Healthcare and a professor at King's College London. And they're using MONAI in a lot of their different workflows, and you'll hear more about that as well throughout the 2 days today. So really quickly, I already covered a little bit of federated learning, but this is what we're going to talk about tomorrow. So if you're interested in federated learning, how do you build collaborative AI with privacy preserving sort of features behind it? We have NVIDIA Flare integration with MONAI, and we're going to be walking over those workflows, and you'll see real use cases of those tomorrow. Last, how do you get involved in the community? Partially, it's attending events like this. So again, I mentioned introduce yourself in the Discord channel is a great way to start getting to meet people, but then also just start using MONAI, submit bugs, issues. We're working on things like how can we do hackathons or bugathons later in the year. So keep a lookout for that. We also have things like the Twitter channel, a Medium blog, other places. And we're also trying to develop a MONAI newsletter so we can kind of get you information of what we're doing throughout the year in different ways. And then if you have a model or you have research that you want to contribute, open up an issue, open up a GitHub issue, open up a discussion, and let people know what you're working on. And we'll find a way to help you get integrated into the MONAI community. Last, there's a bunch of resources here. A lot of these are on the MONAI GitHub page or on the website, and I can link some of these as well. But if you do a search for MONAI, say Slack channel or MONAI YouTube, MONAI Medium, MONAI GitHub, you'll find those coming up on Google right away. But there's also just kind of a quick link here of all the things that are available. And I'll have these slides posted in the GitHub repo, the MONAI Bootcamp GitHub repo, probably by the end of the week as well. So you can also go in there and take a look at it as well. So last, any Q&A before I get started? I'll take a look at chat because I haven't been able to pay attention too much right now. Let's see. So one question was, can we access the recording later? Yes, these recordings will go on our YouTube channel. I'll split them up into sections of, like this introduction will be one individual section. And then as we go into MONAI Core, that'll be a different video. That way it's a little bit easier to navigate around it. It'll probably be later this week or early next week that we have those posted on the YouTube channel. And if you're in the Discord channel, whenever the things are posted into the playlist on YouTube, I'll go ahead and mention it in the Discord channel. And that way, if you want to go back and you missed a section or you want to review a section, you can go ahead and do that.